I never expected my success to become my family's greatest shame. But standing in my parents' lavishly decorated dining room on Christmas Eve, watching my mother's face contort with disgust as I described my latest business venture, I realized some people prefer comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths. My name is Marcus Sullivan, and this is the story of how I went from family disappointment to the owner of my parents' dream mansion. Though looking back, I'm not sure which title weighs heavier. The evening had started like any other family gathering at the Sullivan estate. A sprawling Victorian mansion my parents had stretched themselves thin to purchase 5 years ago. My sister Amanda, the golden child with her perfect law degree and politician husband, had already arrived with her 2 children. They were seated at the mahogany dining table that had been in our family for generations, everyone dressed in their Christmas best. I adjusted my simple blue sweater, suddenly feeling underdressed among their designer outfits. But then I reminded myself that the watch on my wrist cost more than their combined wardrobes, not that anyone would recognize the understated timepiece for what it was. That was the thing about real wealth. It didn't need to announce itself. "Marcus," my mother called out, her voice carrying that familiar note of disappointment. "You're late again. I suppose punctuality isn't important in your— what are you calling it these days? Your startup?" I took my assigned seat, the wobbly chair at the far end of the table, as far from the head as possible. Some things never changed. "Actually, Mom, we just closed our Series B funding round. $15 million in new investment." The silence that followed was deafening. Amanda's husband Richard snorted into his wine glass. $15 million? Come on, Marcus. We all know these tech companies inflate their numbers. What do you really do all day? I could have told them about the revolutionary AI architecture we developed, about our contracts with 3 Fortune 500 companies, about the acquisition offers I'd already turned down. Instead, I just smiled and reached for the bread basket. "We solve problems, Richard. Big ones. Problems." My father finally spoke up from the head of the table, his voice carrying the weight of decades of disapproval. "The only problem I see is you wasting your life on these fantasies. Your sister made partner at her firm this year. What have you achieved?" I watched as Amanda preened under our father's praise, adjusting her perfectly styled hair. "Daddy's right, Marcus. It's time to grow up. I could get you an interview at the firm. Something entry-level, of course. You'd have to work your way up." "That's very kind," I said, cutting into my turkey. "But I'm good where I am." My mother's fork clattered against her plate. "Good? Good? You live in that tiny apartment, drive that old car, and wear the same clothes year after year. How is that good?" What they didn't know was that my tiny apartment was actually the entire top floor of one of the city's most exclusive buildings. My old car was a deliberately understated luxury model with custom engineering. And my same clothes were handmade by artisans who didn't advertise their work with logos or labels. But before I could respond, Richard jumped in. "I heard through some contacts that your company's burning through cash. No real revenue, just fancy presentations and big promises. Classic tech bubble stuff." I raised an eyebrow. "Your contacts?" "I have friends in venture capital," he boasted, straightening his tie. "They say your whole sector is about to crash. Smart money's getting out." I had to suppress a laugh. The smart money he was referring to was likely the Mills Brothers Fund, the same one that had practically begged to lead our latest funding round. I turned them down, preferring to work with investors who actually understood our technology. "Richard," I said calmly, "maybe your friends should do better due diligence." My mother slammed her hand on the table, making the crystal glasses jump. "Stop it. Stop pretending to be successful. You're just a useless dreamer, living in a fantasy world, while your sister actually makes something of herself." Dad nodded along, his face stern. "Your mother's right. This has gone on long enough. Either get a real job, or stop coming to these family events. We can't keep watching you throw your life away." I looked around the table, at my father's expensive watch, my mother's new jewelry, Amanda's designer dress. All the trappings of wealth they could barely afford, bought with credit and appearances to keep up with the neighbors. I knew about their mounting debts, the missed mortgage payments, the tax liens they were hiding. Being on several bank boards had its advantages. "Maybe you're right," I said quietly, standing up. "Maybe it's better if I stop coming around for a while." "Finally," my mother sighed. "He sees reason." I walked to the door, then paused. "Oh, and Mom, Dad, you might want to check your mailbox more carefully. Those certified letters from the bank usually contain important information." Their faces paled slightly, but I was already walking out, closing the heavy front door behind me. As I got into my old car, I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to my CIO. "Start the process." Everything we discussed. They had no idea what was coming. But in 3 months, they'd learn exactly how useless their son really was. I pulled away from the mansion, watching it shrink in my rearview mirror. Soon, it would have a new owner. And the real estate agent's call would just be the beginning of their education about success, appearance, and the true meaning of value. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone's world. Sometimes it's about letting them destroy it themselves, then buying the pieces at market value. The Christmas lights twinkled mockingly in the distance as I drove home to my tiny apartment, already anticipating the meeting with the bank's foreclosure department scheduled for the new year. After all, what's the point of being a useless dreamer if you can't make a few dreams come true? And this one was just getting started. January arrived with a flurry of certified letters to the Sullivan Mansion. Each one bore the same message. The grace period was over. My father had leveraged everything to maintain their lifestyle. The house, their retirement accounts, even Amanda's trust fund. Now it was all coming due. I watched from my office on the 47th floor as my plan unfolded. The view of the city stretched out before me, snow falling softly on the streets below. My assistant, Sarah, entered with a stack of reports. "The bank board approved your proposal unanimously," she said, placing them on my desk. "They were quite impressed by your strategy for handling distressed luxury properties." I nodded, scanning the documents. "And the other matter? Your sister's law firm just lost their biggest client. Apparently, someone convinced their entire tech division to switch legal representation." Sarah's lips twitched slightly. Their partner track might be experiencing some delays. I leaned back in my chair, thinking about Amanda's smug face at Christmas dinner. She'd been so certain of her superiority, never suspecting that her precious law firm depended heavily on clients who respected my opinion. My phone buzzed. A text from Richard. "Need to talk. Urgent. Financial matter." I ignored it, just as I'd ignored the last dozen messages from various family members. Instead, I pulled up the real estate listings on my laptop. The Sullivan Mansion, once the crown jewel of Oakwood Heights, was now featured prominently in the distressed properties section. 3 weeks after Christmas, my mother tried a different approach. I found her waiting in my company's lobby, dressed in her finest outfit, pretending she just happened to be in the area. "Marcus," she said, trying to hide her shock at the sleek, modern office space. "Why haven't you returned our calls? We're family." I gestured for her to follow me to my private conference room, glass-walled, overlooking the city center. Her eyes widened at the view, at the obvious signs of success she'd refused to see before. Family, I repeated, letting the word hang in the air. Is that what we were at Christmas? She had the grace to look slightly ashamed. We were harsh, but we worry about you. And now, she twisted her hands together, designer bracelet catching the light. Now we need your help. The bank, they're being unreasonable. Your father's business has hit a rough patch. That's all. If you can just loan us. How much? I interrupted. 2 million, she said quickly. Just until things turn around. With your startup doing so well. I pulled up some documents on the conference room's display. You mean the startup that was burning through cash? The one that made me a useless dreamer? I scrolled through page after page of financial statements. The one that just acquired your husband's largest competitor for $300 million. Mom's face went pale as she read the headlines, the acquisition announcements, the glowing profiles of our technology in major business publications. But Richard said, Richard? I said calmly, gets his information from golf buddies and cocktail parties. I get mine from boardrooms and bank vaults. Speaking of which, I pulled up another document. Did you know he's been lying about his own firm's finances? That bonus he's been bragging about. It bounced. Twice. She sank into one of the leather chairs, her carefully constructed world crumbling. Marcus, please. We're about to lose everything. No, Mom. You're about to learn the difference between appearing successful and being successful. I stood up, straightening my custom-made jacket. The bank's foreclosure proceedings will continue. I suggest you start looking for a new place to live. We'll be homeless, she cried. Oh, I doubt that. Amanda's condo has a spare room, doesn't it? Though you might find it a bit cramped. I smiled, remembering all her comments about my tiny apartment. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with some venture capitalists. Real ones, not Richard's golf buddies. After she left, I called my real estate agent. How's the Sullivan property looking? Bank's putting it up for auction next month. Given the market conditions and the property's issues, it should go for well below market value. Perfect. Have everything ready. And make sure the purchase is made through one of our subsidiary holding companies. I don't want my name appearing until exactly the right moment. February brought record snowfall and a cascade of financial disasters for my family. Dad's business contracts dried up as word spread about his financial troubles. Amanda's partner track derailed as her firm struggled with departing clients. Richard's golf club quietly revoked his membership over unpaid dues. I watched it all from a distance, receiving regular updates, but never responding to their increasingly desperate messages. Each one reminded me of different Christmas dinners, different insults, different moments of dismissal and derision. The foreclosure notice appeared in the local paper on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, my mother had called 17 times. On Thursday, my father swallowed his pride and came to my office. He looked older, grayer, the weight of his collapsing empire evident in the slump of his shoulders. Son, he said, the words sounding foreign on his lips. I know we've had our differences. Differences? I kept my voice neutral. Is that what we're calling it now? I was wrong, he admitted, staring at his hands. About your business, about your choices. I see that now. But please, this house, it's your mother's dream home. We can't lose it. I pulled out my phone, showing him an email. You already have. The bank is auctioning it next week. Unless you can come up with $2 million by Monday, it's over. $2 million, he whispered. The same amount your mother asked to borrow. Interesting coincidence, I agreed. Unfortunately, My company has already allocated those funds to a different real estate investment. His eyes narrowed. You're buying properties now. Among other things, it's amazing what you can do with actual revenue and solid business fundamentals. He left my office a broken man, finally understanding that his son had surpassed him in every way that mattered. But he still didn't know the best part. That revelation would come at the auction, when the new owner's name was finally revealed. March arrived with unseasonable warmth, melting away the last traces of winter just in time for the auction. I didn't attend personally. That would have spoiled the surprise. Instead, I sent my lawyer with clear instructions and waited in my office for the call. It came just after noon. It's done, my lawyer said. Property acquired at 30% below market value. The paperwork will be public record within the hour. I smiled, imagining the scene that would unfold when my family's realtor saw the name on the deed. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just about winning. It's about teaching a lesson that can never be forgotten. And this lesson was about to hit home in the most literal way possible. The meeting was scheduled for 3 p.m. at Maxwell and Associates Real Estate. My family had no choice but to attend. The bank required all parties to be present for the final property transfer. I arrived early, parking my old car where I could watch them arrive. Amanda came first, her designer clothes now looking slightly worn, her perfect hair showing traces of gray she couldn't afford to cover anymore. Richard skulked in behind her, his former swagger replaced by a nervous twitch. My parents arrived last, Mother dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, Father looking like he'd aged a decade in 3 months. I waited until they'd all gone inside before following. The receptionist recognized me immediately. After all, I owned the building through one of my holding companies. "They're in the main conference room, Mr. Sullivan," she said quietly. "Everything's prepared exactly as you requested." Jessica Maxwell, the real estate agent, was already midway through her presentation when I slipped into the back of the room. None of my family members turned around. They were too focused on the documents being displayed on the screen, papers that would officially transfer their beloved mansion to its new owner. "As you can see," Jessica was saying, "the property was purchased at auction by Horizon Ventures LLC, a subsidiary of..." She stopped, finally noticing me. "Oh, Mr. Sullivan, I didn't realize you'd be joining us personally." 4 heads whipped around, faces showing various stages of shock and confusion. "Marcus," my mother whispered, "what are you doing here?" I walked to the front of the room, each step measured and deliberate. "Please continue, Jessica. You are about to explain who purchased the property." She nodded, clicking to the next slide. As I was saying, the property was purchased by Horizon Ventures LLC, a subsidiary of Summit Innovation Group, whose CEO and majority shareholder is... She paused, letting the moment build, Marcus Sullivan. The silence that followed was absolute. I could almost hear the pieces clicking into place in their minds. Richard found his voice first. You bought the mansion?" "Actually," I said, settling into the chair at the head of the table, my father's usual position. "I bought a distressed property at market value. The fact that it happens to be your mansion is merely an interesting coincidence." "But," Amanda's voice cracked. "But how?" "Your startup." "My company," I corrected her, "which is now valued at just over $1 billion, thanks to our recent technological breakthroughs and strategic acquisitions, including, I believe, your law firm's largest client." Her face went pale as she finally made the connection. You were behind that?" Along with Richard's club membership being revoked, Dad's contracts drying up, and several other recent developments. I spread my hands. Amazing how many doors open when you actually build something of value instead of just pretending to be valuable. My father's face had turned an interesting shade of red. This is revenge, then? For Christmas? Revenge? I laughed softly. No, this is a business transaction. The revenge was watching you all slowly realize that the son you called useless had built an empire right under your noses. The son you mocked now owns the roof over your heads. Mother began to cry, but her tears didn't move me. I'd seen too many of her performative breakdowns over the years. So what now? Amanda asked. You'll throw us out? Make us homeless? I pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Inside, you'll find a rental agreement. The property will be managed by my company, and you can continue living there as tenants. The rent is set at market rate. No family discounts. If you can afford it, you can stay. And if we can't, Richard challenged, though his voice lacked its usual confidence, then I believe Amanda's condo has that lovely spare room you can use, though it might be a bit cramped. I smiled, remembering their comments about my apartment. Of course, you'll have to pay rent there too. I bought that building last week. The room erupted in chaos. Amanda burst into tears. Richard started making threats. Mother wailed about family loyalty. Only father remained silent, staring at me with what might have been the first glimmer of respect I'd ever seen from him. I let them vent for a moment before standing. The rental agreement needs to be signed by Friday. If you choose not to sign, you'll need to vacate the property by the end of the month. Jessica will handle the details. I headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and one more thing. They all looked up, faces showing a mix of anger, fear, and dawning respect. Merry Christmas. A bit late, I know, but better than never, just like recognizing someone's true worth. The door clicked shut behind me, cutting off their responses. In the lobby, I nodded to the receptionist and stepped out into the spring sunshine. My phone was already buzzing with messages, probably more pleas and accusations from family members. I turned it off. Instead of heading back to my office, I drove to the mansion. The grand old house stood exactly as it had that Christmas night. But now, I saw it differently. Not as a symbol of my family's rejection, but as a monument to how far I'd come. I parked in the circular driveway and walked up to the front door, inserting my new key. The foyer echoed with my footsteps as I wandered through the rooms, memories mixing with possibilities. In the dining room, I stopped at my old seat, the wobbly chair at the far end of the table. Taking out my phone, I sent a quick text to my assistant. Have the entire house remodeled. New furniture, new everything. But keep one piece, the wobbly chair at the end of the dining table. Frame it and put it in my office. Sometimes success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. And sometimes the best revenge isn't about making others lose everything. It's about showing them exactly what they failed to see. As for my family, they signed the rental agreement on Friday. Now they live in my house, drive past my company's headquarters, and wake up every day to fresh reminders that the useless dreamer they mocked owns the world they thought they ruled. But the biggest change wasn't in their circumstances, it was in their eyes. Gone was the contempt, the dismissal, the casual cruelty. In its place was something new, understanding. Understanding that success isn't about appearances or pretense. It's about building something real, something valuable, something that lasts. And in the end, that understanding was worth more than any mansion could ever be. These days, when I host family dinners in my newly remodeled mansion, everyone gets comfortable chairs. everyone, that is, except for the empty wobbly chair at the far end, kept as a reminder that sometimes the person you put in the worst seat at the table might just end up owning it. And for a useless dreamer, that's not a bad ending at all.